morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this very special segment today on the 9th day of August 2023. Hey, it's 16 degrees and sunny right here in Brisbane. A glorious day, I must say, but there's a bit of traffic about. So if you're on the roads, do take it easy. Right now, let's get into the news for today. And as we know, there is so much that's happening out there and so much that's been talked about. And while we are talking about all the, the voice to the parliament and the referendum that everyone's talking about, Western Australia Premier announces a repeal of the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Laws.
Farmers left confused and frustrated by new cultural heritage laws marched on WA's Parliament. By the time they got there, the government had already scrapped them. The state will now revert back to its 1972 Heritage Act, with additional protections to give traditional owners more rights to appeal decisions.
We can reset, end all the confusion, and importantly, strike the right balance. We can ensure Aboriginal cultural heritage is valued and protected. And with simple amendments, we can deliver a common sense approach and prevent another incident like Dugan Gorge.
That incident was Rio Tinto's detonation of 46,000-year-old caves, which prompted the WA government to expedite its new heritage laws through Parliament in the wake of global condemnation. The traditional owners of that site say they've been blindsided.
The repeal of the Act and to go back to legislation that was deemed by just about everybody to be outdated and culturally inappropriate was just disgusting.
These farmers have had their voice heard in WA State Parliament, and it's now reverberating around Federal Parliament in Canberra as well. The opposition was quick to pounce on the backflip.
It was draconian, it was an overreach, and it needed to be addressed.
Confusion over the legislation was seized upon by those against the Indigenous voice to Parliament, conflating the two issues in the minds of voters.
It provided a little bit of confusion in amongst WA, and what it did allow for those people that were in the no camp to really try and use that as a reason as to why not to support a voice.
For some in the yes camp, the repeal of the laws now offers clear air as the race to the referendum continues. Catherine Diss, ABC News, Perth.
So staying on to the same topic, let's look at what others are saying and where are we headed with this yes vote. Well, right now, the yes supporters are campaigning in Sydney and as they are around the country.
It's boots on the ground for the Yes campaign in Sydney. Volunteers urging commuters to vote for an Indigenous voice to Parliament.
Well, I think the Aborigines have been downtrodden for years. There's a chance of them giving a bit of advice as to what they would like their outcome to be.
Not all are convinced.
Well, they should be treated like anybody else in the country. You know, they represent about 3% of our population, and it almost seems like 99% of our focus is on those 3%.
Prominent Yes campaigner Thomas Mayo is in Western Sydney, rallying support amongst Catholic school teachers. He recounted a century-long history of defunct Indigenous advisory bodies vulnerable to the whims of governments of the day.
All of these representative bodies were silenced. And in these early days especially, they were silenced through tactics of intimidation.
He argued a voice enshrined in the Constitution would mean First Nations people are more accountable for its outcomes.
When we have power over our destiny, our children will flourish, they will walk in two worlds, and their culture will be a gift to their country.
I think there's a lot of people who are, still yet to make up their mind, and they're looking for more information. So what would really be good to hear it from the voices of those who know, and to really become informed and have a well thought out response when the referendum hits, hopefully at the end of the year.
About a third of all votes in this referendum will be cast in New South Wales, but poll after poll has shown a steady decline in support for the yes case. It means that the stakes are now higher than ever, because if this referendum fails, the Prime Minister has said there's not likely to be another in our lifetime.
I agree with Albanese. There's no going back now. Let's take it to the Australian people and have our faith in the Australian public to support this.
A faith he hopes will be reciprocated by voters who are yet to make up their minds. Nabil Nashar, ABC News, Sydney.
While that might be the case, what about our Indigenous elders? What are they saying? What is the feeling on the ground?
I was born in Bowraville. I wasn't ever taught in schools about anything political. I have a really big thing about inclusion. I'm always triggered to be excluded. My recollection of Bowraville and my life while I was there doesn't come with a good story. There was a lot of hatred.
Arnie B. Ballingarry was 24 years old when Australia held its last referendum on Indigenous rights.
What will it mean if the referendum is passed? Better housing, for permanent employment, and perhaps the most important of all is that of education.
Well, the 1967 referendum, the way I understood it, was to be counted in the census.
Back then, more than 90% of the country voted yes.
Nevertheless, the referendum did reveal what could be interpreted as some pockets of racial intolerance.
What do you remember about that time?
I really don't like using negative words, but I thought it was awful to be posed the question of, should we count you? Of course I want to be counted, I'm here.
And how did you vote on the referendum?
I voted yes.
Why?
Oh, I'd like to see them have a go. I'd like to see the blacks, the Aborigines have a chance.
I voted no.
So did I. You voted no?
Yes, I voted no too. I've had enough of that. You can't trust a bloody black fella, no matter where he is, see? And he gets on the plonk and he won't work. No, I think he's getting a good a deal as well, they're getting a better bloody deal than we're getting, see?
It upsets me to see it. It just upsets me, that's all. That we can't be trusted. That is stereotyping, that's assumptions. I do remember stuff like that. I remember a lot of stuff like that. Recent stuff like that.
Bowraville is in the electorate of Cowper. It recorded the highest no vote in New South Wales.
The third highest in Australia. I find that appalling.
And for Arnie B, memories of a time when Indigenous people were excluded from hospitals and schools in the town are still fresh.
I haven't gone back there much. It brings pain. I can remember Mum and Dad's pain, not being allowed to go to the hospital. For me, Bowraville hasn't changed. I feel for Cowper hasn't changed. I feel.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, both sides of the coin, and many people out there say, why should they be treated any differently? Don't treat them give them each and every right that every other citizen has, and give them the equal opportunity, but not be treated differently. Don't treat them differently. Treat them equally with all respect, due, and dignity. But that, they reckon, can be done without the referendum. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. There is a lot of talk still going until this referendum is done and over with. And we will then look at what the general public has thought, what people have voted for. Well, right now, that 13-year-old who crashed in the Sydney's West. Let's look at that report.
Officers tried to pull over a vehicle at Fairfield around 2:30, but it's alleged the driver failed to stop and a pursuit began. Police say the vehicle crashed and rolled a short time later. The driver and two passengers ran from the scene, but police say the teenager who was driving was arrested nearby.
Once again, a teenage driver, 13-year-old, behind those wheels. Well, right now, looking at the other area, when we talk about the employment and the shortage of staff, especially in hospitality. So what is happening on the ground? Where are the demand levels?
I think what we're seeing is a spike in the number of people looking for staff, but it doesn't necessarily mean more jobs. Our members are warning us that, in actual fact, there's some pretty tough times ahead for hospitality, and they're feeling the pinch now of interest rate rises and cost of living.
So is it simply that they're struggling to retain the staff? Are people walking with their feet? What's going on?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, there's more international workers coming in, which has really helped the industry during skill shortages in the last 12 to 18 months. It's been a real challenge finding staff. I think the shift our members are seeing is that hospitality businesses are having to run a little bit leaner, given that people aren't eating out as much as they used to. Cost of living, as I said, is hitting hard. And what we're finding is they're really trying to find ways to work around overtime bills, and they're trying to find ways to find less expensive staff and reduce their outgoings by hiring direct wherever they can, and also making sure they're managing shifts so they're not paying overtime the way they used to.
So that's
a lot of revolving door around staffing.
Yeah, it's interesting because it seems counterintuitive. You're saying that there's less demand for hospitality, yet there's greater demand for workers.
Well, there's still demand because the industry is still going relatively strong. Less demand than there was maybe 12, 18 months ago. But we are coming off a huge spike where post-COVID, a lot of events that didn't happen all banked up in the chain and they hit last winter. And so we're seeing far fewer corporate events. So businesses are tightening their belts a little bit. There's less corporate entertainment. There's less face-to-face meetings with corporates because of travel costs and a whole range of other things. So there is a slowing in demand. But what we are seeing is the industry starting to manage its staffing differently to the way that it has in the last maybe 12, 18 months. Our members are saying that where in the past restaurants and hospitality businesses were willing to pay whatever it cost for a skilled worker to come in and make sure they could keep their doors open, that is shifting away now to a scenario where they are still looking for loads of staff, but they are looking for more staff for fewer hours so that they can manage the costs that are associated with staffing their venues and their businesses.
We did see award rates associated with the minimum wage go up by 5.75% in July. Has that made any difference?
I'm not sure that the minimum wage has probably made the difference. We've seen in the last 12, 18 months in hospitality huge spikes in wages, particularly at times when businesses couldn't open without staff because there were so few staff available. We're seeing the sort of costs of labour, some really high hourly rates that were being paid 12, 18 months ago, coming back down to more regular levels. Less about minimum wage, I think, and more now for them about trying to manage people taking fewer sittings in their restaurants. So we're seeing, a new restaurant will open in the suburbs or in the city. People are coming out, they'll try it, but they won't come out necessarily for a second sitting. Shorter hours in some cases, and predominantly just trying to make sure that they're managing their staffing roster to minimise overtime and additional staffing costs.
So they were to minimise overtime. There are different shifts. So people are not doing more than the 8 hours. Hence, there is no overtime. So they've spread many different shifts, and because I think it works on the hours worked, not at the starting and finishing time. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. Right now, let's move on to this other area. Mushrooms, love it or hate it. But right now, there is a health warning.
Foraging for mushrooms is a long-standing tradition in many parts of Australia, but health authorities warn against it. They say it can be difficult to distinguish the good ones from the dangerous ones. So which mushrooms should be avoided? What grows where? And what should you do if you get sick? There are two poisonous mushrooms that are of particular concern: the death cap and the yellow staining mushroom. The death cap usually has a pale green, yellow or olive brown top with white gills and stem and a cup-like shape at its base. They often grow below oak trees. Yellow stainers look a lot like the ones you buy at the supermarket, or like edible field mushrooms, but their white top turns yellow when scratched. It's the most commonly eaten poisonous mushroom in Victoria. They can grow in large clusters in lawns and gardens. Usually these mushrooms are seasonal, but La Niña and its rainfall mean they've been growing year-round recently. Mushroom poisoning can cause nausea, stomach cramps, vomiting and diarrhea. While mushroom-related deaths aren't common in Australia, the aptly named death cap is by far the most dangerous. It's responsible for 9 out of 10 deaths globally, and just one can kill an average-sized person. There are other poisonous mushrooms that should also be avoided, like poisonous pie and ghost fungus. You can't tell a mushroom is toxic from the taste, and it can take 6 to 24 hours for symptoms to start. People should seek medical help as quickly as possible. Experts say if you are foraging, you should take photos of what you collect and keep a sample, just in case. But their key advice is, if you're not confident about what you're collecting, don't risk it.
You are, just don't risk it at the moment. So, yeah, no mushrooming about. Keep away from those mushrooms. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have for you in this segment. But before we go, let's take a look at some of the functions and events taking place. There you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. Hey, it's been wonderful having your company today. And don't forget that India Day Fair, 19th of August at Roma Street, Parklands. We'd love to see you all there. Until then, it's goodbye from this segment. We'll see you all back tomorrow.